All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're here today from AppalReD Legal Aid to talk about elder abuse and some of the legal avenues that exist to help victims of elder abuse. So, first, if you don't know what AppalReD is, we're a nonprofit legal aid organization serving low income individuals in Eastern and South Central Kentucky. So, a legal aid organization is basically a law firm that helps people with civil legal problems who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford a private attorney. So we don't do our work for profit. We don't take payments from our clients. Instead, we're funded by donations and grants from private and public organizations. We don't help people with criminal problems, but we represent people with issues like evictions, public benefits getting taken away, divorces, custody rights, domestic violence, writing up wills, and all sorts of other things along those lines. You can reach our website through our Facebook page. And from there, you can call us or apply through our website if you have a problem that you'd like to help or legal advice for. So that's who we work for, but let me introduce the three of us specifically. So, first today, once we get started on our presentations, we'll hear from Leigh Ann Moore. She's an attorney at our Richmond office who will talk about elder abuse in the form of domestic violence. Then we'll hear from Seneka Land, an attorney at our Somerset office, who will talk about elder abuse in the form of financial exploitation from family members and other trusted individuals. Then you'll hear back from me, Caleb Pittman. I'm also an attorney at the Richmond office. I'm going to talk about elder abuse in the form of financial scams, things like those robocalls that I'm sure we all get. And last, I want to mention that we're all what are called VOCA attorneys. VOCA stands for the Victims of Crime Act, and our positions are funded by that act. So each of us represents clients who have been the victims of some type of crime, and we help our clients with the civil problems that come up because of those crimes. So, with that out of the way, each of us are going to talk briefly about our subjects, and then at the end, we'll have time to answer your questions. You can just type your questions into the Facebook chat below this video at any time, and we'll get to them at the end of the discussion. And so, with that, I'll turn it over to Leigh Ann to talk about domestic violence.
Thank you, Caleb. Good afternoon, everyone. As Caleb said, elder abuse can take many forms. It can be physical, emotional, financial. It can occur through fraud. Today, we're going to explore a few of those forms, the ones that are the most common, the ones that you are probably seeing. We hope to be able to answer your questions about those topics, and we hope that this is something that will be able to benefit you and those around you. I specifically am going to be talking about physical and sexual abuse with you today, some of the legal remedies that are available to a person who might be experiencing some type of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. In Kentucky, there are legal remedies for both civil and criminal courts when it comes to physical abuse. Here at AppalReD, like Caleb said, we only practice civil law, and we help people obtain civil protective orders. A civil protective order, or what you may think of as a restraining order, is a court order signed by a judge that prohibits the other party that you file against from communicating with you or from being around you up to 500 feet. There are temporary orders called emergency protective orders, and there are also long-term protective orders called domestic violence orders or interpersonal protective orders. These are all civil orders, but it's good to note that a violation of a protective order, even though it's civil, can be a criminal offense and it can be prosecuted criminally. You should seek a protective order of this kind if you have been abused or if someone has placed you in the reasonable fear that you're going to be abused, such as a physical injury, physical assault, or sexual assault. I think there's a pretty common misconception out there that protective orders can only be obtained through family court for spouses, and that's certainly not the case. Here in Kentucky, you can obtain a temporary or long-term protective order against someone who has harmed you if they're in a familial relationship with you. What that means is this can be a spouse, an ex-spouse, a child, a parent, a grandparent, a grandchild, a dating partner, someone you share a home with, someone that you share a child with. You can also seek a protective order against someone who has sexually assaulted or stalked you. It is important to be aware, especially for our elders, that you can seek a protective order against someone who is an adult or a minor. So this is helpful information for elders if they need to seek some type of protective order against their children or their grandchildren. So you may think, that's a lot of information. What am I supposed to do with that? Here's where we start. If you need to obtain a protective order, you should first seek the assistance of law enforcement or go to the clerk's office. And when I say clerk's office, I mean your local family court clerk. They can provide you with a petition. A petition is a form that you're going to fill out to let the court know who has harmed you and what type of harm has been done, and any fear that you have of harm that could occur again in the future. This petition is then reviewed by a family court judge, and the judge will determine if it meets the criteria to enter a temporary emergency protective order. Once a temporary order is entered, the court is going to set that for a hearing date, and that will happen in family court. Kentucky family courts can issue protective orders of this kind for up to 3 years, and those 3 years can even be extended past that time under certain circumstances if the person asking for the order asks for it to continue. We want you to be aware that you can seek counsel in this type of case. You can elect to go to court alone. You can ask for a domestic violence advocate to sit with you in court, but you are certainly entitled to have representation with you, whether that be a private attorney that you hire or that be a legal aid attorney like us. We're happy to go with you to court. We're happy to answer your questions about domestic violence situations. We have very experienced attorneys that attend court for domestic violence survivors on pretty much a weekly basis in every single one of our offices. And we are able to give you legal advice about those situations. We're able to help you ascertain when it's best to seek a protective order, the implications that you're going to have if you get a protective order, and talk to you about what it's going to be like in court. We are there to be your voice and to help you feel heard and to help you get the protection that you're going to need if you have fallen victim to one of these situations we've discussed. However, if you do not fall under the categories that we've discussed regarding your relationship to your abuser, you can always contact your local county attorney's office or your police department to report any other abuse that may have occurred against you. Often criminal charges can be sought against those who have caused you harm. Additionally, when we are specifically talking about abuse against the elderly, we would like you to know that you definitely can report that to the Kentucky Elder Abuse Hotline, and you're going to see that information on the slides with us right now. Please also be aware that it's a mandatory reporting state here in Kentucky, so if you have actual knowledge of a child, an elderly person, or someone incapacitated or disabled being abused, you have to legally report that. I'm going to turn it over to Seneka now, who's going to be addressing elder financial abuse. If you have any questions about what I've discussed, please let us know at the end of our discussions today. Thank you.
Thank you, Leigh Ann. That was very informative. My name is Seneka Land, and today I'd like to discuss with you elder financial exploitation. First, some facts. Each year, up to an estimated $36.5 billion is exploited from Americans over the age of 60. And although it is the most common type of elder abuse that is reported each year, only an estimated 41 out of every 1,000 cases get reported. Well, who are the most common perpetrators? Well, 58% of the time, it's usually family members, spouses, children, extended family members. 17% of the time, it's someone that they know and are close to, friends or even neighbors. 15% of the time, it is nursing care assistants, and the remaining 10%, it's strangers. Why are these incidents so rarely reported? Well, oftentimes, whenever it is a family member, the senior doesn't want them to get in trouble, and that's understandable. And oftentimes, seniors don't want to seem weak or being taken advantage of because people assume that they no longer are able to care for themselves. Well, how can we help? First, we need to be aware of these things when they happen. And here are some warning signs. What they all involve is comparing the present to a baseline, okay? Did the person go from being very good with their money to having bounce checks and unpaid bills? Are they going to the bank or the ATM more frequently than usual? Do they talk about talking to or spending time with someone now that they never spent time with in the past? Do they ask for financial assistance now when they never did before? Have there been recent changes to their will or other estate planning documents? And have you noticed that they have any missing belongings, especially ones of significant value that could have been sold? Next, what do you do if someone you know is the victim of financial exploitation? First, we urge you to report it. There are several options available. You can call the police because it is a criminal offense. However, sometimes, especially in more rural communities, police are just unable to assist with some of these cases since they're very specialty. You can call the Kentucky Adult Protective Services. Their number is on the screen right now, the 877 number. Or you can call a licensed attorney, including legal aids such as AppalReD. We are free, or some of the other legal aids are low cost if you qualify. Our central intake number is also on the screen. It is the 866 number. What can be done? Okay, we can assist you in filing civil orders to get the finances that were taken from you and exploited from you returned to you. Also, the perpetrators, should you choose, can be charged criminally. The amount where a misdemeanor turns to a felony for the average theft is $500. But because exploitation of a senior is such a heinous crime, the amount is simply $300. And most importantly, how can you protect against this before it occurs? First and foremost, we urge you to remain socially active. Isolation allows the exploitation to go unnoticed. And oftentimes, if it is a stranger or an extended family member, they target people that are isolated so that they can attempt to get away with it easier. Avoid having a joint bank account. Although it is common to have a joint bank account with a family member or a child so that they can assist you in these payments, we find that oftentimes they will use those funds for their own money. Whenever possible, do not give up your home. It is typically a senior's largest asset, and as long as you own it, it will be a safety net for your financial security. And finally, and most importantly, don't be afraid to talk about it. You are not alone. This happens frequently to people, not just seniors, but of all ages. Perhaps the person that you talk to or the legal aid that you call, such as us, we can assist you before it happens again. Next, I will turn it back over to Caleb Pittman so that he can tell you specifically about more of the most common scams. Caleb?
Thanks, Seneka. So, like Seneka said, financial exploitation of elders is a huge problem. And although it's most commonly perpetrated by people who are in a position of trust, like a family member, even the relatively small amount that's perpetrated by strangers in the form of scams is still itself a huge problem. As you mentioned, elders lose approximately 36 to 37 billion per year to financial exploitation. So even a number like 10% of that is still a huge problem. And recent studies have shown that something like 1 in 5 seniors have been the victim of some kind of scam to some degree. So it's commonly experienced among the elderly. Now, I'm sure everyone has, received some kind of robocall or something that seemed like it was probably a scam. But what you may not know is these are often specifically targeted at the elderly. And that's because, in general, the elderly in the United States are more likely to have assets available than younger people. Even elderly people who may not be wealthy typically at least have some kind of steady income in the form of Social Security or pension benefits. And even though that's not much to a stranger who doesn't really care about the well-being of somebody, they'll take whatever they can get. Also, in the United States, the elderly, as Seneka mentioned, are more likely to be isolated. And when someone's isolated, they're more likely to fall victim to a scam because there's not someone else around who can point out that something might not be legitimate. Also, a big reason is that the elderly tend to be more likely to believe that people are trustworthy in the marketplace. That's not to say that they're especially naive. There've always been con artists and things like that, but the scale of financial scams in recent years has really ballooned beyond what it ever was before. Uh, it used to be relatively rare that somebody would have the nerve to say fraudulently pretend to be an agent of the government in order to get somebody's money, because that would be a huge crime. However, with the way that people can make international calls and use software to fake what number the call is coming from, it's much easier to get away with a crime like that now than it ever has been before. So we see a lot more people doing some very brazen attempts at fraud to get money. And also, it has to be mentioned that 1 in 3 seniors in America die with some degree of dementia. So although that might not be the biggest cause, it is a factor that plays into it. You certainly don't have to have a memory impairment or anything like that to fall victim to one of these scams. But from the perspective of a scammer, the likelihood that the person you're calling might have some kind of impairment like that is an asset to them. So I'm going to go over some of the most common scams that have been reported in recent years that are still ongoing, and some people listening to this have probably encountered at least 1 or 2 of them. So the first is people who will uh, pretend to be some kind of government agent. One of the most common is the Social Security Administration. These usually take the form of robocalls, where it will tell you that your Social Security number has been suspended because of suspicious activity or because it's been linked to some kind of crime. And they'll tell you that you need to speak to a representative in order to get your Social Security number unfrozen. And if you press the number that it tells you to and you speak to somebody, they will then ask you for your Social Security number to verify your identification. And generally, what they're actually doing there is mainly trying to get your information to steal your identity. They'll use your Social Security number for all sorts of illegal purposes to try to launder money and things like that. And they may also tell you that you need to pay some kind of fine or something to get your Social Security number unfrozen. None of that is ever the case. A Social Security Administration would never call somebody if there was some sort of problem, and you can't have your number suspended for any reason. So in general, if you receive a call from someone purporting to be from a government agencies are only going to reach out to people through the mail. They won't call you on your cell phone. Similar to that, there's a lot of calls going out for people posing as the IRS, claiming that you are owed money from the IRS and or that you owe money to the IRS and that they need you to wire money to them to pay IRS debt, or they need your bank information so they can pay you a refund that you're owed. Again, the IRS is never going to call you for one of these purposes. You'll receive something in the mail for that. So the next main type of scam is people posing as tech support for large companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft. They will call saying they've detected a virus or some other kind of problem with your computer, and that they need you to help them set up remote access to your computer so they can help you with the problem. If you go along with it, they will then either themselves install some kind of virus or something that allows them to collect data from your computer, or they will simply run some kind of software on your computer to make it appear that you have a virus and then try to charge you money to fix the problem. And much like with the government agencies, Microsoft, Apple, these companies are not going to call you for something like that. So you can, if anyone calls claiming to be from those companies, you can pretty much just hang up. And then the last main kind of category of what people normally see nowadays are people posing as representatives from either a local lottery or some kind of sweepstakes organization, claiming that you've won money and that they just need you to wire some kind of money to pay for taxes or customs duties or something along those lines so they can get you your prize money. So they might say you're going to get 5 million and all they need is $5,000 to release it. And if people go along with that, generally they keep just asking for more money for various fees and things that have popped up until they eventually disappear. So, having talked a little bit about the different types of popular scams, there's the issue of what can be done about it. Now, the main problem is, like I mentioned before, a lot of these scams are coming from numbers that are very difficult, if not impossible, to trace. And they may also be coming from areas far outside the jurisdiction of the United States. So it's very hard to prosecute them, and local police are generally not equipped to deal with anything like that. However, the Attorney General's office does have a scam reporting line, and that's at 502 696 5389. There's also the number that's listed here on the feed, and they could direct you to the proper place to report it. There has been some luck with the Attorney General actually recovering money from people. So if you know someone who's been the victim of that type of scam or anything along those lines, it is definitely worth reporting it, just on the chance that you might be able to recover money. And also because the Attorney General does release scam alerts to try to warn people about scams. So if you've experienced a scam, it's worth reporting so that other people can be warned and they might not be victimized. And you can sign up for scam alerts just by texting KYOG scam, KYOAG scam to 468-311. That way you can receive alerts to help prevent you or a loved one from being victimized. But finally, the reason we're talking about this today is that even if you might not be able to recover money directly from the people who fraudulently took it from you or a loved one, there's all kinds of other consequences that often happen when a senior has been the victim of a scam, like they might be at risk of being evicted from their house or other issues like that. And we are able to help people when they're in those positions. So certainly you should feel free to call us to seek advice or legal help with these problems. If you've been the victim of scam, or if you know someone who has, please encourage them to call us. And in general, I would remind everyone that if you need help with anything that we've talked about today or with any other civil legal issues, you can call the number below for our central intake line or go to our Facebook page. From there, you can get to our website where you can also apply online for help. And so with that said, I'd like to open it up for questions now. Like I said earlier, feel free to type your question into the chat below if you haven't already. And so let's see. So for our first question, what should I do if I believe staff in a nursing home is abusing one of my family members? So Leigh Ann, you've kind of talked about some of that.
Sure, and that's a really good question. That's a question that we get quite often. Keep in mind that you can call us for any type of legal advice, as Caleb and Seneka have both said. But if you suspect that someone is being abused in a nursing home, please call that hotline number, the very first number listed, the 877 number, and report that. They are going to take that very seriously. It's going to trigger an investigation into that nursing home, into their staff, and to make sure that your family member, loved one, or friend, whomever you feel is being abused, is looked after and that it's been taken seriously.
All right. And let's see. And so what do I do if an elderly family member doesn't want to report a scam? So I can take that. That is a good question. There are times, especially, some types of strangers might pose as a potential dating partner or something online to gain the trust of somebody. And you might know an elderly family member who's the victim of something like that, but doesn't believe they're the victim. In a situation like that, you certainly still can report the matter to the Attorney General. Um, However, any criminal prosecution of the person perpetrating the scam is going to depend on the person actually claiming to be a victim generally. So in a situation like that, each individual situation is going to be different. I would encourage people to try to talk to their family member about that, and you could also reach out to us for advice on your particular situation and ways that you might be able to deal with it. Okay. So we have another question of what should I do if I feel a family member is exploiting me financially? And Seneka, I think you talked some about that.
Yeah, thank you, Caleb. Again, and this does kind of seem repetitive, but it's good advice. Both numbers that are currently on the screen are there for you to utilize. The 877 number, you do not even have to give your information. It can be completely anonymous. It doesn't have to get the family member in trouble unless you seek that. And again, feel free to call AppalReD. Our number is also on the screen. There are many legal options available to you, and give us a call. We will sit down with you, find out what's going on, and we will try to help you as best that we can.
Oh, great. Okay, so we have another question of if I take out a DVO against a family member, what are the negative consequences for them? That's a good question. And Leigh Ann, I think you could talk about this.
Definitely. That is actually a very good question. And that's something that people don't always think to ask us initially. That is something that will often come up after your hearing. And so it is good to keep these things in mind. When we say that someone has to stay away from you because of a protective order, and that's up to 500 feet, that doesn't just include your home, that includes public spaces as well. And it includes the home of others that you may be visiting. And that's especially important to remember if this is against a family member and you have relatives in common. This is not a criminal type of order. We've talked about that, but it's good to reiterate that there can be criminal consequences if there is a violation. And that's a big implication to someone that's going to have this against them. That should absolutely not stop you from seeking protection, but it is information that people want to know. Otherwise, people that have domestic violence orders against them cannot possess a firearm. They cannot obtain a new firearm. They will be in the system to where the FBI would actually be alerted if they attempted to purchase a firearm. And those are the ones I'm thinking of right off the top of our heads here. So if you want to give us a call with any of those kinds of questions, please refer back to that hotline number that we have at the bottom of the screen. We're happy to talk to you about that.
That's great. And I think it's good to kind of reiterate so people can keep in mind that if they're in a situation where they're being abused, but for whatever reason they hesitate to call the police because they just don't want their grandchild maybe to have a criminal record. A DVO, a domestic violence order, restraining order is not going to have as severe of consequences as a criminal charge would. And it's a way to keep yourself safe if you just don't feel like you could go through with pressing criminal charges.
Absolutely. It's a very good point, Caleb.
So we have another issue. How do I handle going to court for a DVO or another type of case during the current pandemic? So I think that's very relevant for people who are elderly and who may be more susceptible to the current pandemic. And I think we could kind of all talk about that to some extent. So the main thing is many courts right now are holding all
Absolutely. I think all of us as attorneys are seeing this as a question that's coming up for a lot of people. Most courts are some affected.
Oh, you can go ahead, Leigh Ann.
I'm sorry, I think it glitched on us a little bit. I was just saying that as attorneys, I think we're all seeing that. Most all civil cases are occurring virtually right now. It's either on Zoom, Skype, or another method that particular county prefers. Some criminal matters are still taking place in person, and there are a few exceptions to where a few counties are having in-person hearings. But Caleb, I think you can talk about that a little bit. There's exceptions for those who are vulnerable and who are elderly, and you've had that come up in some counties where you're having in-person hearings. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. The counties who are having in-person hearings, there is a Supreme Court order that they have to enforce social distancing in the courtroom. Everyone is required to wear a mask to come in, and from what I've seen, the bailiffs have been doing an excellent job at forcing people to sit at least 6 feet apart so that nothing can be spread. Everyone's temperature gets checked when they come in, and they generally are only allowing people in who are necessary for the hearing. So you can't really bring a lot of family members or friends in with you, nothing like that. But that also means it's easier to prevent the spread of any kind of disease. And also, even if they are having in-person hearings, anyone who, for whatever reason, can't come in or doesn't feel comfortable coming in can still appear either just over a phone call so that the judge can just hear their voice, or they will help you set up some kind of Skype or Zoom, some kind of video calling software on your phone so that you can call in. And in that case, the judge and many of the other people will be present in the courtroom, but they'll have a screen up so that you can see the judge can see you, and you can talk just as if you were there. So I don't think anyone should feel reluctant to file a DVO petition or initiate, some kind of criminal charges or anything like that, just because they're worried about being able to go to court during the pandemic. If for any reason you can't go, the court will make accommodations for you to appear remotely.
Yeah, just to clarify with something that Caleb just touched on, if perhaps you feel like you're not very tech savvy and the thought of doing Zoom or Skype just doesn't work for you, it is okay. Most judges will just simply call you on the phone, and you don't need to worry about going there or risk anything, especially if you are already high risk. All you need to do is talk on the phone and tell the judge what happened in your situation, and they can hold the hearing just as if you were there. It's simple as that. There's no reason why the pandemic or any other reason should dissuade you from seeking legal help.
Yeah, that's a great point. From what I've seen, the clerk's offices have been, very accommodating with people, either in helping them set up the software, or, like you said, if they can't, they can just really do it over a simple phone call. All right. And I don't see any other questions coming in. So I think to kind of wrap things up, I would like to reiterate that if you or a relative or a friend, anybody like that, a loved one, if you are having problems with anything like this or other civil legal problems, again, our number there for the central intake is up on the screen. Please call it or encourage your loved one to call it for their issues. You can also go to our Facebook page. All of our information is there. On our website, if you don't feel comfortable for some reason talking on the phone, maybe you're forced to live with someone who is committing abuse, you don't want them to hear that you're talking about it when you call in to apply for our services, you can go to our website. There's a form there you can submit to apply for services. And then we'll get back in touch with you. All right. And so I think that's everything. So with all that being said, I hope everyone is staying safe during the pandemic. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out if you're experiencing any problems with anything like this. Thank you.
Thank you.
legal aid provides assistance to people who don't have the money to hire an attorney to help them present their case. When we recite the Pledge of Allegiance, we end with, "and justice for all." And that's what legal aid does. Legal aid helps make that promise a reality in the United States, so that justice is for all and not just for the few who can afford it.
There's no way in the world I could have afforded to get legal representation if I had to pay. And so, you know, when you get the type of representation that I got, and it's a nonprofit organization, I don't really know if there's any words that can describe how much that means to a woman coming out of an abusive relationship with 2 children. You know, can you really put a price on your and your children's safety? And so I'm just really grateful.
She had filed this domestic violence petition alleging that her now ex-husband had followed her state to state. And so she had moved to Kentucky for a support system, and he showed up randomly. And that's when she became terrified because of the history of domestic violence.
I've had to go to court many times by myself, and the anxiety and the paranoia and just the physical illness that you feel, terrified that you step. No one should ever have to go into a courtroom without representation. No one. We don't know all the legal mumbo jumbo. There's times when I was in court with her where we get out of court and I was like, what? And she's had to explain to me, you know, what was said, because when you get into all that legal talk, for someone like me, you're speaking alien.
I feel like it makes the community better because we're able to go to court and hold people accountable and ensure that the justice system is a little more fair.
I mean, I remember after I sat down with her for the first time and just did a consult, I cried for about an hour in my car down the road, because it was, I don't want to get emotional. It was the first time somebody cared. It was the first time I had like a beacon of hope.
You are entitled to an attorney in criminal cases. Unfortunately, that does not spread to civil cases. So it can be very scary for someone to encounter one of these lawsuits and know that they have no right to counsel.
My husband ended up having emergency heart surgery, and they was not sure if he would survive or not. So I ended up halfway through my mortgage, and then the mortgage company decided that I would not re-qualify for the balance of my mortgage. So I started making phone calls to get help to not lose my home. This was my inheritance, was this piece of property. I feel like it's my heritage, and they were going to take it away from me. It doesn't give them a right, because they have more money than me, to come after me. And people don't have a recourse. People feel that I did not feel that I had a recourse at the time. I could not afford to pay thousands of dollars out an attorney. I'm trying to save my house. If I can't pay the house, I can't pay a big high-dollar attorney bill. So then we started a bankruptcy proceeding, which stopped them from coming. In the meantime, while I was in this proceeding, though, the mortgage company sent a person out here to my home while my husband still had stitches in his chest to put a lock on the house. And I did not even have a court order. And I said, get off my property. When my grown children stepped up and helped, and if we hadn't had them, I couldn't have made it by myself. Between them and AppalReD, the good Lord above, that's what saved us.
My 21st birthday, I landed on Eglin Air Force Base. So I served 4 years active duty there on Eglin. I traveled all over the United States, and I got to do one tour in Saudi, 129 days. I don't particularly care for that one, but it gave me experience. In 1999, I had my son, and I decided to not renew my contract with the Air Force, and so in December of 1999, I got out, came back home. I had to have a surgery, and so I had to take some time off work and couldn't do a whole lot there for a while, so I got behind on Financial matters, the Jeep being one. Actually, it was 14 days past the due date and he took my vehicle. I called the police, first of all, and then as they were talking to me, and they said, well, is it financed? And I said, well, yeah, but I mean, it's not 30 days late. He agreed to take my payment, and nowhere in my imagination did I think that he had took my car. So they checked into it, and sure enough, it had been repossessed illegally.
When I talked to the man who owned the car dealership, I didn't say anything to him really other than this is the law.
She was something, let me tell you. She didn't let him mow her or plow over her like he did me.
So I'm always happy to sometimes explain the law to a car dealer if I need to, and that day I think he heard me loud and clear, so we were glad.
The day we signed the contract and I drove off in my Jeep, it was like, I know it's not the most beautiful vehicle, but to me it is, because it was a battle getting it back. I only have 2 more payments. I will have the title free and clear on my Jeep, which is wonderful to me.
The need for our services in our community is overwhelming, and unfortunately, based on the resources that we have, it's not uncommon that we have to turn people away for services.
People go into court, face the loss of their home, maybe the loss of income, the loss of custody of a child, maybe the loss of health coverage, any variety of very important and life-changing interests that are at stake. And anybody with money would never face those kinds of issues without an attorney. One of the things that drew me to legal aid was the opportunity to work for the powerless, for the forgotten, for those who have no one else to stand with them. And we at Legal Aid, we are there to stand with those people who have no one else. And I continue after 20 years of doing this to be so proud to be a part of this legal aid community that does so much every day for people when they face these kinds of problems without lawyers.